Hello everyone and welcome to Pyanodons Mods. This is Otaku's Showboat, and today we are going to be discussing neuroprocessors. If you have been enjoying these tutorials thus far, please be sure to do all of the social and engagement stuff below the video. I do stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/otakushowboat. You can of course also support Pyanodons Mods development at patreon.com/Pyanodon. and myself at patreon.com/otakushowboat. So, neuroprocessors are going to be required to get into Pi science. They are also used in a lot of Pi alien life buildings at Mark II. That is the biggest bottleneck into getting the Mark II in particular buildings through Pi alien life stuff. So you're going to be limited on these. Guaranteed, you're going to be limited on these dramatically, actually. In particular because of a few of the ingredient costs in here. Because it's a lot of resources. It's a lot of resources that go into these things, and the science is going to use a lot of them to begin with. I have 0.3 here listed on the output in particular because 0.3 matches the complete output of one factory for the optical fiber, which is our first ingredient here. 1.5 optical fiber is the output of one entire automated factory making optical fiber, and you can see some of the material costs that go into the production of the optical fiber here. You can sort of see some of these ingredient costs. Yes, this is post-molybdenum. Yes, to get into neuroprocessors, you have to have done optical fibers already, and we covered that in a previous video that was unfortunately plagued with the dolly being dolly and wanting to play while I was recording. That does not appear to be the case today, fortunately, for this particular video on the neuroprocessors. So, first ingredient of neuroprocessors is the optical fiber. You can refer back to that video where I cover optical fiber in its entirety. The next ingredient on here is Nexulut Matrix. This you can make pretty much whenever. You absolutely should have Nexulut being made by now, and the ingredients in here are all stuff you should already have access to. I mean, the boric acid comes from diborane, comes from borax, comes from raw borax. The treated wood is wood plus creosote, and vacuum is just made on demand through pressure pumps. Two of them, actually, in this case. They each have, each building is 10 vacuum at Mark 1. For the pressure pumps, so do keep that in mind. Hello, Ollie. Hi. Ollie's here. He's brought me chipmunk. Yes, Ollie. Go get it. I literally just said that Dolly wasn't here to play fetch today, and that the video would probably be okay without having the kittens bothering too much, but here is Ollie now with his own toy to play fetch with his own toy, his own little. This is basically the same toy except it's a different color. This is chipmunk. Yes, this is. Ow! Go get it. Ow. Yeah, he just got my leg. Continuing, let's not spend time with that as I now have a scratch on my leg as he went to do the thing. I do hope you saw his paws going after it, because yes, he's a little bit more ferocious with his claws. The next ingredient that I will break down, the next ingredient is the PCB2s. PCB2s are pretty big to get into. I'm realizing I haven't actually broken down everything in here at this point, so let's go ahead and break some of this stuff down in some way, shape, or form. We'll get into some of this going forward. So the PCB2s, copper plates, nylon parts, phenolic boards, tin, as well as etching solution. Etching solution is going to be the hardest part, I would say, of any of this. Of course, nylon. We've seen, at this point, nylon from optical fiber. So, nylon is also used in optical fiber. I won't really talk about that one too awfully much today. So, etching solution, lard, phosphoric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrogen peroxide. Well, hydrogen peroxide is going to be made out of nickel plus anthraquinone, and then the anthraquinone, or quinone, or however you want to pronounce that, is chromium plus aromatics plus liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen will require gasoline to make it. I haven't broken it down any further than this here, so just bear that in mind. Chances are you've already done something involving liquid nitrogen if you've already set up the optical fiber, etc., etc. So that's that one. The sulfuric acid, take your pick, whatever method you want to choose to get into sulfuric acid. Phosphoric acid, I have an entire video covering the phosphoric acid processing chain, the processing of phosphate rocks into all the various things. Lard. At this point in the game, you may have access to Muckmo, or you may not. It all will depend on whether or not you've done artificial blood yet. If you went through doing rare earth processing and cobalt processing to get into artificial blood to get Muckmo, use Muckmo. I have not presented Muckmo here. I have instead presented Augs, because those are the cheapest alternative, in my mind, would be to use the Augs for this. Note that Ulrich are also only 2 lard. They're also relatively cheap. Their buildings are smaller than Augs. So really you would have the option either way, Ulrich or Augs. I've just went Augs here for my own version of simplicity, them only being moss and biomass on their most basic recipe. So there's that. However, if you do have Muckmo, you can get 5 lard out of a single caged Muckmo. However, Muckmo buildings are among the largest in the game. They are definitely the largest of all of the animal buildings. If I'm not completely mistaken, I believe they are the largest. They're like 16 by 16 tiles or something along those lines. And yeah, it's a bit, they're a bit big for their buildings, or for Muckmo to have to deal with in terms of space usage, as well as their material requirements to actually make caged Muckmo in the first place. They require a few things. I'm thinking it's Relesia and Fawagi are 2 of the main things as to what they use. So if you have them, great, use them. Use them for lard. Use them for lard for etching solution. If you don't yet have them and you're waiting a bit longer to get into your rare earth processing until you're working directly towards circuit 2s, rather than neuroprocessors, let's say that you are just trying to get into Pi Science, you've done some vat-brain biocomputing for Blue Science, now you're trying to set up some dedicated Pi Science before moving into the more complex circuit 2 build that you will need to do for your real chemical science build. So if that's the case and you haven't done rare earth yet and you haven't done artificial blood for the Muckmo, for your first Muckmo, absolutely go with Augs. However, since you already need brains, since you need brains 2, and brains, you only really get 1 brain out of most every animal on the most basic recipe. I say most because Arthurians will give you 2 brains on its most basic recipe, and will scale better with upgraded tech along the way. You don't have access to them yet, so chances are you're going to want to have an AUG build anyway for brains. Again, just because of the cheapness of their costs. Ulrich you might be able to get away with a overall less space intensive build with Ulrich, but yeah, just I would have AUGs for brains. AUGs for brains, AUGs for guts, AUGs for skin, or maybe Ulrich for skin, I don't know. Stuff. AUGs are pretty ubiquitous. They get used for a lot of things early on. Early on, they just are a great default option for you, no matter what you need. However, if you have Mukmo are better for guts as well as the lard. So there's that. All of that said for the brains and such. So there's the etching solution. We also need, as I had said, the phenolic boards, and the phenolic boards all the way down here. They're going to require bakelite, fiber board, sodium hydroxide, and ammonia. By this point in time, you should know about getting all these other things. Let's have a look at just the bakelite here. The bakelite's going to need zinc chloride, as well as biomass, phenol, and formaldehyde. You've already done stuff with formaldehyde by now. If you've done optical fiber by now, you should know about the phenol. But just to reiterate my thoughts on the phenol, if you have done that brain biocomputing for chemical science, you have the most important recipe, which is the distillates recipe for cumene. This is a very key recipe in my mind. This would be one of the most important recipes in the entire pie suite for me to recommend people to get into. It is likely the best recipe to get into, because it is a very, 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 very good alternative to spending phosphoric acid. This simply spends too much phosphoric acid for it to be a useful recipe at any stage of the game. In fact, the fact that it uses phosphoric acid, period, makes it a not particularly good recipe to consider using at any phase of the game, unless you are absolutely forced to, which, if you have chosen not to do vat brain biocomputing, that's what you're forced to do instead at Green Science. There is an alternative way of getting into phenol, and there are many ways of getting into phenol, but the primary alternative is to do coal and filtration media. That's the one that you will have access to at Green Science. Filtration media consumes more zinc in the form of activated carbon, so I always try to avoid that. And yeah, good luck with the coke byproduct there and being able to get rid of that on a consistent basis. You do need biomass, which is pretty free, and you need zinc chloride, which that stuff is an ingredient in activated carbon, which you should probably have by now, considering that you need to get into filtration media to get into molybdenum processing for the molybdenum plates for optical fiber. Optical fiber needs aramid, needs molybdenum plates, needs filtration media to process those molybdenum plates, needs activated carbon, needs zinc chloride, needs zinc. So there you go. There, good luck with getting the stuff and the amount of stuff that you need for all the various things that it's used for. And of course the nylon parts, not from nylon. Nylon, I prefer the blood meal recipe. You can refer back to the optical fiber discussion video where I talk about that. And oh hey, look, more phenol. Right there, more phenol. And then we get into the cermet as the next important thing that's broken down. We'll talk about the other ingredients here that I haven't broken down shortly. So cermet is the other main thing to worry about to get into the neuroprocessors. This stuff is going to require ash, crude cermet, as well as lubricant. Lubricant is a 1-to-1 from heavy oil. It's easy, it's fine. You can get into that. This recipe is totally viable. 1-to-1 from heavy oil, you just have to get into heavy oil, which that in and of itself would be steam cracking crude oil 1-to-1, crude to heavy oil, plus steam, depending on how you get your steam, that can adjust the ratio a little bit. In the alternative, if you're playing Pi block, the crude oil is a little bit more difficult to get since you're primarily getting stuff out of tar, not crude oil, of which distillates becomes a viable option for you to get into lubricant, or fish oil, or aromatics, because you can do aromatics directly from tar as well. And this gives you sulfur that you can use for other things. So do bear that in mind. The crude cermet, though, is going to require molybdenum and nickel ores, as well as ceramic. Ceramic's like a base material we dealt with circuit 1s, so we'll ignore that for now. You need some extra molybdenum ore and nickel ore. So if you have a standard map, you will want to try and find an area that has moly and nickel close to each other to set up your cermet. That's just my general recommendation, is just to try to find on the map any area that has nickel and molybdenum relatively close to each other. I don't even know if this particular map even has moly, let alone has a nickel near a moly. I have forgotten at this point the actual color of moly. I think it's some sort of blue on molybdenum. Some sort of blue or purplish type of thing. Purple itself is tin. Is there even a moly? So the other thing about molybdenum is that the patch sizes by default are very small. They're very, very small patch sizes, which can be problematic. I always recommend increasing patch sizes just across the board, but in particular for moly, just the sheer amount that you need is pretty high. So, yeah, in fact, I don't even see any moly among all this stuff. Pretty sure there is something that exists somewhere, but hey. So, my point here is good luck with finding moly near nickel. Now, if you are playing something more along the pi block lines, where you have to get this stuff from water, my recommendation would be that the copper processing chain gives molybdenum as a byproduct, molybdenum ore as a byproduct, making it pretty viable for cermet in particular, and then nickel can be made directly out of tar. Tar plus hydrogen equals nickel ore, which again, I mean, you have access to even under normal circumstances on the regular Pi suite. So if you do have a moly patch that you want to tap into to make cermet, and you don't have any nearby nickel, you can make nickel on demand if you have access to tar somewhat close by. So do keep that in mind in terms of how to get your nickel for the cermet as well as the moly for the cermet. Now, moly itself is just feed the mining drills some drill heads, and they will operate for you just fine. There's no fuel that you need to get the moly. If you ground bore moly, however, you will need to have drilling fluid 3 as well as gasoline to do the ground boring for the moly. So that can be rather expensive, and it adds up quick. Now, that's all the stuff that I've broken down. There are a few other ingredients in here to at least mention and talk about. One is agar. Agar, you've made agar since the beginning of the game. You don't have to worry about that. Biosamples, pretty expensive to get this many biosamples at this phase of the game. Just, again, reiterating a point that I made in my video where I cover biosamples, or whatever video I did that I mentioned and talked a lot more about biosamples. I know I've talked about this in various circumstances. Biosamples get better with modules, especially being able to put speed in these. Speed and efficiency make biosamples better. It makes them cost less because they use fuel. in the form of the biocontainers to make biosamples, and you can really game the fuel mechanic in Factorio. However, if you are playing PyBlock, you don't get that anymore, and yeah, you're just basically screwed with biosamples being incredibly expensive throughout the entirety of the game because you do not have the fuel mechanic or biosamples anymore that you can exploit with the power of modules. And as for the rest of this, I mean, nickel plates are nickel plates, that's fine. The capacitor, inductor, and resistors, these are all Circuit 1 materials. These are not Circuit 2 materials, these are Circuit 1 materials. So they are ceramic tin, copper ceramic, and coke glass and tin. So just, yeah, they're super simple items that you've made already for Circuit 1s. Just make more or do a dedicated build for this that has those things in. And with that, you will have neuroprocessors and will be one step closer to Pi Science. One step closer to the wonderful world of Pi Science. Now, I have not done... I think I have not done a good alien sample video yet, so what I will do in my next tutorial that will come after this, I will have a video about Pi Science where I will talk about good alien samples in a little bit more detail, and then mention that, hey, neuroprocessors are a big step for this, and go over the types of things that Pi Science unlocks, why you need to get to it, when you need to get to it, etc., etc. That will be its own updated video. For now, though, I would like to thank you all for watching. This has been Otaku Showboat. If you have enjoyed this particular tutorial, please be sure to do all of the social and engagement stuff below the video. You can, of course, follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/OtakuShowboat. You can support Pyanodon's Monster Development at patreon.com/Pyanodon, and myself at patreon.com/OtakuShowboat. I will see you all on the next one. Thank you.